Comparison is not the thief of joy, contrary to popular belief. By the way, look at how beautiful the ocean looks today. As always, I'm going to be going through a Nietzschean lens. So, if we're completely honest with ourselves, when we compare ourselves to other people, especially because, all right, so let's think about it this way. When you hear the common platitude or maxim, whatever you want to call it, saying of comparison is the thief of joy, typically people talk about that from the standpoint of comparing themselves to somebody who they believe is better than them, deep down. So, for example, let's say that you're having some money problems, and then you compare yourself to some rich 17-year-old on Instagram who made millions of dollars drop shipping, ostensibly. Because, who knows what the actual reality is. It might just be a scam. But regardless, you don't feel very good about yourself. You're like, if I only just stop comparing myself to other people, I'll feel better. And that's just simply not true. Because if you think of it from that perspective, yes, if you're comparing yourself to somebody who's better than you, or you think is better than you, you're not going to feel very good. But that's not necessarily a bad thing, and I'm going to loop back around to that in a second. Let's first observe the opposite. When you compare yourself to somebody who you think you're better than, you feel very good. This isn't just my theory. You can actually empirically see this to be true, all right? So if you go on social media, especially anything political or anything ideological, let's just take the manosphere versus feminism, for example. Half of manosphere content is just bashing on women, bashing on simps, and by bashing on them, the commenters or the viewers feel something. What do they feel? They feel superior. By having contempt for somebody or a group of people, you're able to then elevate yourself up. And so from that standpoint, you're still comparing yourself to others, right? You're just comparing yourself to people who you think you're better than. And then you feel very good. You look at the type of propaganda and the types of stories that the news media tends to want to cover. They tend to cover people who are contemptible, and therefore you feel good. So if you see some sort of drama of maybe not drama is the right word, but if you turn on your local news, half the time you just see a crime happened, somebody died, and this is the terrible person that did it. How dare they? That type of stuff, all right, well, you're subconsciously comparing yourself to the criminal, and it's like, oh my God, there's so many evil people in this world. What's happening to this world? What's happening to my city? But you sort of have this feeling of excitement. It's because when you have that feeling of excitement, really what you're doing is you're kind of comparing yourself to both the perpetrator and the victim of that crime. Where you're just like, well, I'm not an evil POS like the perpetrator, and I'm alive and breathing, unlike the person that died, right? And so you feel good. And I think most people, when they say this quote, comparison is the thief of joy, they don't think of it from that perspective. They think of it more of, it hurts and it's painful for me to compare myself to somebody who's better than me. And so this is where Nietzsche comes in. So Nietzsche believed that, it's a popular concept of his, or pretty well known. It's master and slave morality. So master morality is the original morality of the masters in ancient times, where they just started off with the value judgment of, I'm awesome, I'm good, I'm powerful. Anything that's not like me is bad. And then the slaves, on the other hand, who were subservient to the masters, had the opposite valuation, saying that, these masters are mean. They must be evil. Anything that's the opposite of them is good. And in the genealogy of morals, he has this entire sort of polemic, as he calls it, play out. And the conclusion of it is actually that the slave morality ended up winning in the form of Christianity. Again, this is Nietzsche's thoughts. And so we are 2,000 years down the line of or approximately 2,000 years of Christianity winning out. And so slave morality is the norm. And so a slave, naturally, he cannot actually identify himself, or he cannot say who he is or affirm who he is unless there's an other that he's comparing himself against. The ideal way of not having to compare yourself against anybody and just starting off as like, I'm good, I'm awesome, that is a master morality way of thinking. But based off of the Nietzschean worldview, well, he believed that we're both, our morality of whatever time that you're living in, especially in the West, is a result of both master morality and slave morality, sort of a mix of both. However, it's quite clear that slave morality has won out over master morality. That sort of comparative framework, right? Of saying that these people are bad and therefore I'm good. So the mentality of the slave is comparing themselves because they cannot affirm themselves starting with just them, right? And we are the descendants of that sort of way of thinking over the past few thousand years. And so it's very interesting because, yes, comparison, the reason I say comparison isn't the thief of joy is that because slave morality basically has won out, even among the best of us, we cannot help but feel joy when we compare ourselves to others. And so it's important to first identify, okay, well, what is the reality of who we are and how we actually think? And this is how Nietzsche thought. He didn't just read a bunch of history textbooks and come to this conclusion. Actually, what he did, or it seems like, this is my theory, I think there's a lot of evidence for it, is that he looked internally as to how he thought about the world. And then from there, he started to connect dots as to like, okay, why do I think about this? Why do I think this way? I was formed and molded by Christianity, like most people back then. And I have these certain ways of thinking that I wasn't able to choose. But was this something that is naturally occurring, or is this something that was taught to me? And obviously, at least from this perspective, he believed that these were ideas that were implanted in him from a young age due to his Christian upbringing. His father was a pastor, and everybody in Germany back then was very religious. And so, where was I going with that? It's so nice out here, and I have the sun beating on my face. Sometimes, like, you just lose your train of thought or something, you know? So, where was I going? Let me collect my thoughts real quickly, and then I will start talking again. All right, I found a nice place to sit down so I can focus a little bit better. So we're getting in the weeds of the important topic that we're talking about. So, so Nietzsche looked back on history to see, okay, like why do I think the way that I do? Why do modern people think the way that they do? And then he sort of took a historical analysis after that. It might not be the most historical or most empirical from the standpoint of looking at history first to view the world. Some people disagree with me on this, but whatever. I think it's true. And I think there's a lot of evidence for it. But anyway, regardless of that, he believes that with slave morality winning out, that it's much more natural for us to be comparative creatures, to compare ourselves and have an other we need to compare ourselves against it to make us feel good. Unlike the original master morality that didn't need to have that. However, so obviously it's not good to be like, oh, well, I have to have contempt for somebody, or I need to have hatred in my heart of an other in order for me to feel good about myself. But however, that's slave morality winning out, right? And so the whole idea of the Übermensch is somebody who doesn't need to do that, somebody who can create new values. You can't create new values if you're comparing yourself constantly to other people. And so Nietzsche also famously said that nobody has ever even come close to being the Übermensch. Even the closest among us, somebody like Napoleon, for example, is still human, all too human. He's way more closely aligned in his temperament and who he is, although he was a great man, to like a common slave as he is to the Übermensch. So the Übermensch is a goal to strive for. So ideally, and a big part of Nietzsche's morality, or philosophy, I should say, is overcoming and becoming better, right? And so let's go back to the original thing, comparison is the thief of joy. Well, you're going to feel better. Like I made the case already that you're going to feel better if you're comparing yourself to people that you have contempt for. And I also said that you're not going to feel very good when you compare yourself to people that you think are better than you. However, that is where strength and growth lies. If you have the courage to be like, okay, this person is better than me at XYZ. They might just be better in general. That doesn't make me feel good. When I compare myself to them, I feel like shit. I don't feel good. Most people run away from that feeling. But what Nietzsche would say is, that is sort of a call to action. Like that is your sign that you should compete against them and become better. Nietzsche was really drawn toward the Greeks, and the Greeks had this concept called agon, which is the root word for antagonist, like in stories, right? And in a great story, the protagonist has a worthy antagonist that they're competing against, and then by competing against them, the protagonist becomes better, and eventually, ideally, they're triumphant over the antagonist. That's any great story. And so in order for you to have a perspective on how great the protagonist's story was and his journey was, he needs to have had something that he overcame, more specifically, a powerful opponent. And this is, you see this a lot in Greek mythology, but the reason that you see that is because of the concept of agon, right? And the concept of agon as well was central to the Olympic Games, of having all the best athletes in Greece compete against each other. And so if you adopt the maxim, comparison is the thief of joy, that very saying can be the thing that limits you from growing, because it limits you from competing against other people. Competing against other people, especially worthy adversaries, people who are powerful, just as powerful as you or more powerful, that is where you become bigger and stronger and better, adopting a bit more of that higher morality rather than that slave morality. However, we're human all too human, right? So you cannot help but feel good when you look down on somebody else. Why do you think racism and xenophobia is, and especially was back in the day, universal, ubiquitous across all different societies that never interacted with one another? Everybody was racist, okay? Like us teaching ourselves to not be racist was something that we had to learn. You know, it's the natural temperament for us to look at other people and look at them with suspicion, and sometimes even look at them with scorn and think that they're beneath us, right? That's more of a slave mentality, because usually you do that because you're scared, hence xenophobia, phobia meaning scared, right? So if instead you could have that opposite thinking of you acknowledge this is a worthy opponent. This is why Nietzsche said, love your enemies, because your enemies' victories become your victories. You should have worthy adversaries in your life that help you become stronger. This is also why Nietzsche refused to acknowledge or write about people that he honestly thought was beneath him. And he would only write about people who he thought were intellectual equals. So a lot of English philosophers, he just thought they were stupid. So he didn't even acknowledge them. However, some French philosophers, even though he had, and other German philosophers, that although he had heavy disagreements with many of them, one guy in particular, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who was heavily inspired the French Revolution and the American Revolution, actually. He disagreed with him on almost everything, but he kind of was willing to get into the intellectual boxing ring with him because he looked at him as a worthy adversary, right? And so obviously he's comparing himself or comparing his ideas to Rousseau. And is that something, did that like bring him misery? No, that brought him joy, that he was able to have somebody to compete against, to compare his ideas against. And especially if if you're triumphant in your ideas and your ideas end up being better than theirs, because that's sort of the agon, that intellectual battle arena that he was engaged in, then that gives you a sense of joy. You become more powerful, you feel your own power, and you feel way better. It's a healthier way of you growing and feeling good about yourself, as opposed to an unhealthier way is to look down on other people and then elevate yourself as a result. However, that part, and Nietzsche acknowledges this too, that's a human, all too human aspect that we have of ourselves. That's the slave morality that we have inside, that all of us have, even the best of us. So it's important to acknowledge that that's there, but not let that control you, and ideally instead direct that aggression and that violence that you naturally have, especially as a man, more toward worthy opponents to be able to become better, right? You want to have worthy opponents that are actual people, actual ideas, but you also want to have worthy opponents as well that are like, it's like yourself. You're trying to become better than yourself today. But especially in the self-improvement space, people always talk about how like, oh, it's just you competing against yourself. You're not competing against everybody else. That's BS, okay? Like, that's just an ideological worldview, very optimistic one, but I look at it equivalent as like, I'm surrounded by sand right now. I think it's equivalent to somebody just burying their head in the sand and not actually seeing reality for how it is. We are comparative creatures. The very fact that a maxim like comparison is the thief of joy even exists in the first place goes to show you that naturally we compare ourselves to others. Instead of just saying, oh, that's bad, you don't need to do that, maybe it's better to look at it and say that this is a necessary part and this is just inextricably tied to the human condition. This is just how humans are. And instead of, flagellating yourself with shame about how that's such a bad thing, maybe acknowledge what that is first and then work from there. Use that to your advantage. Yes, I naturally compare myself to other people. How do I make this natural proclivity something that is good rather than something that's destructive? And I think I laid out the answer here. I hope I did. The way in which you make that a healthy thing is that you compare yourself to people who are either at your level or better. You compete against them to try to become better yourself, instead of the easy route of just looking down on people that you already believe yourself to be better than. Because either way, you still get that cathartic feeling of feeling your own power. But this one can lead to just you developing a big ego, becoming a narcissist, and honestly not really growing as a person. And this one forces you to grow. It's just a lot scarier, which is why most people don't do it. I think that's all I gotta say about this video here. I freaking love where I live, man. It's beautiful. Southeast Asia is a highly underrated place. I love it. And recently I was like, I just wasn't really feeling filming videos like this again for the Lost in the Labyrinth series. Because I just want to be outside a lot. I love nature. And, before I was just filming in my room. And I thought to myself this morning, it's like, dude, I should just walk around and film anyway. So that's what I'm doing. So hopefully this video turned out well. I hope the audio quality is okay because I was right by the ocean for a long time. So I'll see how it is when I'm editing this. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you like this sort of video style of me just walking along the beach. And I think I'm probably going to do more videos like this because I'm just going to have this as part of my morning routine. I absolutely love talking about these topics, and I love walking along the beach. Walking on the sand, walking in nature is when I get my best ideas anyway. So I think it's going to be kind of cool to capture those ideas on video during this series. If you haven't already, go ahead and follow me on Instagram at Beyond Self Improvement. I have additional content that I'm not posting on YouTube on there, as well as, I have like 10 followers on there so far. So if you ever want to contact me or message me, or just have a conversation, just hit me up, man. Just message me. If the account one day gets to like thousands or tens of thousands of subscribers or followers, I should say, it's probably going to be tougher for me to have conversations with a lot of people. But for now, I definitely can do that. Because my older accounts on my older YouTube channel, I got up to a few thousand subscribers or followers on that account, and it got tough for me to get back to people and have conversations. It started to feel like a job. So, but for now, hey, I'm happy to get to know my subscribers, especially if you're the first few first couple few hundred that have subscribed on this YouTube channel. So that about does it. I'm going to walk back home and get started with my day. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and thank you for watching. Goodbye.